Cool. Well, look, let's get into it. So, first of all, obviously, thanks very much for joining, Jeroen, and jumping on for a conversation. So, for those people who obviously may be listening to the show and who don't know who you are, would you like to give a quick intro to yourself, who you are, what you're doing, why are we talking today, and just anything that you would like to highlight, and then we can dive into the discussion.
Very good, Stuart. My main profession is I'm a keynote speaker, and the topic that I'm passionate about is strategy and AI. So not the technology side, but the impact of artificial intelligence on how a strategy of a company should be defined. I've been running around for quite some time. I've been doing this for 25 plus years. I've written a few books on the topic, and I also am a professor at the TS Business School in the Netherlands.
Awesome. Look, a very impressive and concise intro. I like it. So, look, what I think is exciting about talking to you, Jeroen, is obviously as a man who straddles the academic and professional world, I'm really keen to hear your perspective on a few things that we mentioned in our prep and that I would imagine have covered in your book. So, the thing I think it would be interesting to sort of talk about to set the stage is I wanted to get into obviously your 3A's model, because I think that aligns very well, and also highlights a few of the things that I've been focused on with the businesses that I'm involved in. But before we do that, I think what would be interesting to to note is, and also to set the scene, is just talk through a few of the things that are happening here in Australia in the news and what's going on, and the general attitudes to AI at the moment, because I feel like there's a lot of background stress, I would say, in some circles about it, and I think you're the same as me, right? Where you're pretty positive about it, and I think we both see the benefits, but you'd probably be stupid to assume that there's no risks as well that are attached to it. So there's a few interesting things that have been going on down here. Like the two things that I wanted to highlight, which were in the stats that I shot through, are that interestingly, only 12% of Australian leaders say that generative AI specifically is actually transforming their businesses at the moment, which is lower than the global average, apparently. However, we're obviously getting AI pushed on all of us at the moment, and it's like the savior of everything, insert subject, if you listen to anyone who's in the bubble. So before we got into the specifics of your framework, I just wanted to get your steer on that. Obviously being based in Europe, is that the same? Are you seeing the same sort of commentary and attitudes there? What's the general vibe around the AI revolution at the moment, and what have you seen specifically from your engagements recently?
Well, I do see a shift, but the shift is maybe a little bit different than how you've just described it in Australia.
Okay.
We see in Europe is that up until, let's say, mid last year, everybody who was technology minded was very enthusiastic, and everybody who was not technology minded wasn't interested.
Yeah, it's probably got a good distinction to draw there, right?
Yeah. So, but I think since about a year, we see, for example, I run a master on AI and strategy. And the first year, all the participants were, let's say, IT experts who wanted to learn a little bit about strategy. What we now see is that most people, also in my keynotes, you get a lot of CEOs, a lot of business leaders. So we see a clear shift in Europe that people start to get aware that whether or not this is going to be norm or not, or whatever, we at least need to know what AI is and how it can impact our strategy. So,
Yeah, got you.
and that's a very positive evolution, because I think that a lot of the negative vibe exists because people have no idea on what is AI or what can it do. And I think once you increase knowledge, people's fear will decrease. It's like in the time when people thought the world is flat and you're going to fall off when you start traveling. And so that kind of dynamic is so. basically what I see now is that most of my keynotes now are actually yeah, more like an advanced training on AI.
Mm.
People get the basic building blocks. Um, so inspiration is less needed. I think most people are either very positive or very negative. So there is enough emotion, but it's more the direction on, okay, how can we now get with the right knowledge, take decisions that make sense for my company.
Yeah, right. That's quite interesting actually, because I'm sure you see the same. Like I'm, in the bubble and see a lot of the extremist commentary to either side. I would say, like social media and like across the traditional media as well. But just digging into a couple of those points you just mentioned, I think what's particularly interesting is like the C-suite, for example. I saw a really funny piece of commentary about this that was just summarised by "Boomers love AI." Basically, was the gist of the criticism at the end of this piece of commentary. But do you think, or would you say it's accurate, the media narrative that basically the C-suite are just taking these tools and using them to sack everyone, and getting all excited because they think that they're now a genius and they can run their entire business single-handedly, or is that just a bit of an invention of the media to try and continue to remain relevant and keep their own businesses going?
Well, I think the media has learned that if you put the word AI in the title, it gets more clicks. So
Yeah.
the topic is very popular. And I do think there will be business models that will be AI first. Um, as we saw also with internet when it came, you have some businesses that are internet first, but
Mm.
the classical store didn't disappear. If you look at Nike, who said, let's go and focus everything on internet sales. Well, if you compare how well they've done compared to Adidas, for example. Um, so I think it's much less black white than we think. And to be honest,
Mm.
there are very few people, I think, on this earth today that know exactly what exactly is going to happen. But just to give you one stat from Europe, the recruiting of IT personnel is increasing in some countries, not decreasing.
Mm. Yeah, that's good to know actually, because I feel I know a lot of people in IT, as I'm sure you do, and they were pitched as one of the first departments to be on the chopping block, right? But then I guess, as you say, that comes from people not really understanding the tool and just believing the hype, I guess, right? And being like, oh yeah, it can just do everything. But I mean, I'm sure you know as well, right? It can't do half the things that the owners of the AI businesses claim it can do. It's amazing, but it's not as amazing as people think at the
Yeah,
moment.
and in a way, AI is a prediction machine. It's
Yeah.
basically pattern recognition and a pattern recognition on knowledge. And we used to have the same thing, pattern recognition on products, and that's been the whole factory revolution that we've had. So
Mm.
if I look at IT, everything that's related to knowledge repetition, like coding, that will disappear. But everything that's not repeatable, like how do we now integrate AI into our processes, you need expertise. So I still think that the IT departments will grow, but not anymore on the knowledge repetition side.
Mm.
And I do see the same thing will happen in, for example, universities or any other areas where there is knowledge repetition. AI will take over, but you can do so much more or find so many more areas where you can apply it, and there you
Mm.
will need the expertise to do so. It's like search engine optimization. Um, 20 years ago, that role didn't exist, and it's now very popular. It will probably disappear again and turn into something else with AI. But
Yeah.
so I see the workforce evolving, and the the risk that I see is that senior leaders should be proactive on the reflection on how the workforce is going to evolve. Because in those areas where people are important, the war on talent will be even more crazy. If you
Mm.
see today, it's already happening with the mega scalers, the Amazons and the Googles from this world. If you see AI specialists moving from one to another company, how expensive it is.
Yeah.
So there is scarcity, and I think as an organization, what I would recommend people listening is to focus on the knowledge side, like I've said before, and make sure you know more than your competitor, and that will give you a better approach to your strategy. But also wake up your HR department. Uh,
Yeah.
it's not about firing people; it's about reskilling, but mainly also about what kind of talent should we find? Where can we find it? How can we get it on board? Because today, to be honest, I meet a lot of leaders in different organizations, but the average knowledge that you see today it's scary how low it is. So,
Mm.
and it's also scary how few people in the organization that have available that can have even what we would call, Stuart, the basic discussion. How few people we would
Yeah.
have in the room to talk about AI and strategy.
Yeah. Look, that's actually a really quite an amusing point because, and there's a few things you said there that I think it'd be good to dig into. But like I used to jokingly like because I did a philosophy degree, so like when I was back at Group M, like and managing teams, like everyone always used to ask me what I actually did with my degree, and then my usual default joking answer would be like, oh, we'll just be your boss basically. But then I actually had a really awesome team at that time who were all really good specialists. Like they're all very like on the ball and like excited about their subjects. But your point around genuine brain drain, I know is another favorite of the media to sort of just drop in as a great sort of controversial talking point. But it sounds like you're actually seeing that in real life as well. And I know there's a lot of discussion about it down here because obviously Australia is like smaller pool of people, like the talent can get quite concentrated in certain areas. So it's a real like sort of economic challenge here to keep up with the pace of change. But is it is it something that's a genuine concern? I mean, it sounds like it is from what you're saying, right? At the board level, that we just have people who can't think critically or like sort of understand how to work something out and then just extrapolate it into what they could be doing in their day to day. Like, is that accurate? I guess is the question I'm asking.
Well, it will probably differ from region to region. Um, um, I just came off a call from the Middle East, and there the topic is really hot.
Mm.
So I think there the media also could play a positive role. I think Europe is catching up, but still lagging behind a little bit with the US, for example. And there is a knowledge gap because the topic is so new. And my colleague at the university who teaches the technical side says it's the first time in my career that I can't follow. And he's a
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
smart person. So if you look at it from a technology angle, people have the feeling always to be behind the curve.
Mm.
However, the good thing is if you look at it from a strategy perspective didn't change. Whatever Michael Porter came
Yeah.
up with so many years ago, it's still 100% valid. However, the impact AI will have on the business is going to be quite big because it will
Mm.
have an impact on the job, it will have an impact on the processes, it will have an impact on your business model, it will have an impact on your HR policy, it will have an impact on your IT. So it will touch everything. So
Yeah.
the wave now is a tsunami and not like a little small wave that you can expect. And that makes it from a knowledge perspective important to speed up, because the decisions you have to make today will be different than next year because you will get agentic AI and then robotics will be around the corner before we know it, etc., etc. So it's a knowledge revolution, and
Mm.
surprised that people don't approach it with, okay, let's then increase our knowledge. I think the idea is now, okay, there is a knowledge revolution, so we can be now more stupid, or we can lean back, or we can. No, it should be the other way around. And I think by having this technology available, um, I use it, for example, a lot in coaching, and I'm an amateur photographer. So I've learned more about photography in the last 6 months than I've had before, because I now
Yeah.
have a coach available 24/7 who can help me correct. I can send photos, I get feedback, and so that's an interesting one. And
Yeah, that's cool.
yeah,
Do you feel like your skills have improved so far, Jeroen, from your photography coaching, like robotic coaching, I should say? Like, how are you going at the moment?
it's going very well, and I'm now working with a company where we are have like a basic model that I've developed, and we're now seeing how we can commercialize the model as a
Yeah, cool.
online AI coaching framework that you can adopt and apply to your specific challenge. So
Yeah, nice.
I'm rather positive on the whole topic. Yeah, as you can
Actually,
topic. Yeah, as you can.
I think, I mean, like I agree with you on a lot of those points. Like, because I think not just because I've been trying to be more positive in general this year from spending a lot of time complaining last year, but I think like I have a lot of discussions with Canva's my favorite example in this sort of space for this stuff, because where I think AI as a tool and a sort of a mission, if you want to call it that, it is exciting, is the democratization of so many of these previously sort of gate kept or pretty niche skill areas. I think is actually super powerful, and like I've got a few issues with some of it, because obviously being a musician as well, like I just don't love the way that it's the music apps and AI models have essentially just stolen a ton of work and are now basically having it resold. But I also think there's a good use case there as well. I just don't, that's a discussion. We can speak for hours about that. But sticking with the current example, I think, Canva is a great example of where previously you had stuff like Photoshop, which is very expensive and very complicated to learn to use if you're, a normal person who doesn't want to sit like working out what masks and filters and, color grades and everything are. And Canva just solved a massive problem for everyone who's just you're running a small business, you need a flyer, whatever. Like you need to resize an image and constrain the proportions, which apparently nobody knows how to do, which I realized is one of their like main selling points. And I feel like the whole sort of knowledge revolution you're talking about, this is where it's really exciting, right? Because we can just, in theory, uplift the sort of basic standards and level of knowledge of so many people in a huge, sweeping kind of, well, a tidal wave, I guess, although without getting washed away. But I guess where there's a bit of a challenge or a problem with that at the moment is like if we're also saying that the basic critical thinking skills and, sort of average brain power is kind of draining out of business, for example, like, is that going to happen? Or is everyone going to sit back and we're going to end up in like the Wall-E future where nobody knows how to do anything and we're all just blobs in chairs, like ordering stuff from Amazon? Like, do you feel like we're leaning one way or the other at the moment, or are you remaining quite positive about it?
Well, I remain quite positive about it. I have no future mirrored, so I don't know exactly where we are going to land, but I see it as a workforce reshuffling. Similar to if you look at a factory pre industrial revolution and afterwards, um, they look different. I recently was with a client and I went around in their logistical area and I looked at the old way, how they did it, and then the new way. Both areas, both parts of the warehouse still had people. They had the same amount of people pretty much, but the volume they did with the new way of working was 20 times higher
Yeah,
than with the old way of working. So
yeah,
I think there is a productivity jump that is going to be made. I think people won't become obsolete. So in this example, in the old way, people had to run around to find stuff in the warehouse. Now people stuck at one spot, and you had an AI application on uh, more than 100,000 boxes, and you type in the computer what item you need, and AI will sort it out. And the amazing thing is that during the night, AI keeps working and will start positioning the boxes in the cube based on what they think the items that will be needed most the next day will be put in place.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. And of course, those people have to be reskilled and they have to learn now to work with the computer. So yes, there are some challenges, but they also have some new jobs because they now have to make sure that the cube is working. They have to. So I really see it as an evolution. Of course, if you are now a coder, I would definitely recommend to learn a few other skills because your skill is repetitive knowledge business that can be done cheaper by AI. But
Yeah,
if you are a search engine optimization specialist, well, rethink your job and you can become a generative engine optimization
yeah,
and focus on that. So I'm not that negative. There will be, however, certain businesses where you have almost no people. It's like the dark factories in China, and so there will be extremes. But I'm rather positive, and I think by using AI in a good way for yourself, you can also boost your own knowledge. I gave the example of photography, but you can apply it on leadership. You can apply it on your coaching skills. You can apply it on. Um, so there are a lot of um, advantages as well. The only thing we can't do is wait.
yeah,
I
yeah,
think waiting is the worst possible outcome today. You don't have to take a decision in your strategy, but at least upskill yourself, upskill your company, and yeah.
No, I'm with you on that. Like, I think zooming back to the just the human side of all this, like, I totally agree with the points you're making, Jeroen. And like, I think that, as you said, like, unfortunately, we're living in a time now where, with everyone having a small computer in their pocket who can just amplify their views across the internet at a moment's notice, discussion does seem a bit divorced from reality a lot of the time if you're online a lot, as I obviously am. But I think, I love the Industrial Revolution example because it's a perfect sort of analogy for the change that we're seeing now. And like, as you said, the nature of production changed like forever then, but craftsmanship didn't die off. Like, it's not like people still buy tailored clothes, right? Like, you can still go and get someone to make you a pair of boots from scratch if you want. So those people are still here, and it's not like those skills have disappeared. It's just that we're much more efficient, and all the people who made terrible boots are now no longer here, right? Because they didn't survive the improvements in standards that we now have everywhere. So I'm with you there, and I think I know people like to pretend that it isn't, but in reality, like, things are changing all the time in every imaginable way, and it's nice to pretend that that doesn't happen, and we're all sort of in a stable, steady state, but we're not, like, in reality. So I think that's interesting to bear in mind. One thing I wanted to ask you though on the C-suite front is that, to your point around reskilling people and actually looking after your staff. Obviously, as I'm sure you've seen in various Western countries, there is a bit of a backlash at the moment against the less savoury side of capitalism, shall we say, and if you look at big tech, which is one that we watch a lot, there's a few big companies, I won't name names, who literally every year just fire like 20% of their workforce because they can, and then they sort of rebuild. Now, based on what you were saying before, you would possibly suggest that they have a responsibility instead to be reskilling people, right? Or if they've hired too many people, they shouldn't just be kicking them all out. They have do they have a sort of moral responsibility to their staff to look after them, or are we going to see more C-suite and board members just saying, look, like, if people don't seem to be keeping up with the pace of change, let's just boot them out and we'll hire people who do. Like, I suppose this is two questions. Do you think that's something that companies should think about? Like, is there an ethical or moral obligation to sort of support people through the change? And then I guess the follow-up question to that is, if you're not going to do that, like, how do you deal with that as someone who's maybe getting a bit left behind and who maybe needs more help? Like, what do you do if you've been sacked and you've got no, no desire to keep up? I guess is the other part of that.
Yeah, there are many elements related to that topic. Let's
It's
see if
probably a big question to answer.
I can feel them off. Well, first of all, I've helped a lot of companies over the last 25 years. And when you look at cost structure, every organization has a little bit of what I would call fat.
Mm.
So there is always some redundancy on the people side. Maybe in some areas they have not enough people, but in general, because hiring goes way faster than firing, most of the organizations have between, let's say, 8 and 12% body fat. If the business is growing, that's fine, because then you have like people on the bench and you have more flexibility. So it takes away the pressure from HR to finding people. But it's there. What you see is that every so many years, people like to trim the fat in their organization when maybe the results aren't that good or there is a new CEO. And what I see now is that a lot of organizations use AI as an excuse to clean up some of the body fat that they have been accumulating over the last years. And the way to see that, for example, is that they're mainly reducing people in the management layer. And management has not yet been affected by AI in such a volume that it requires a redundancy effort. If you focus more on specific jobs like coding, etc., yes, there the impact is visible. So I think everything we read in the media is not. It's like never waste a good crisis.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
whenever you see something, okay, let's now use this because it will be more acceptable for the unions. So that's one thing. The second thing is that we don't know exactly where where people will be, let's say, redundant or not, but we can make an estimation on if you look at it through a knowledge. With the definition we've just used, it's knowledge revolution. So I have quite a few clients already that have looked at their workforce map and have made an outline on, okay, if we calculate how quickly it could be, and we take, let's say, the most positive scenario, the most negative scenario, where are we going to be in 5 years' time for each of the job families in an organization? And by doing that, if you then map, for example, people that like natural attrition, that people leave, or you can get a pretty good view on what the impact will be and on what reskilling could do. There are lots of research data. So I can make you a very detailed map for your company that will predict where you're going to be between now and 5 years, playing with quite a few parameters.
Yeah, okay.
If you have that already on the shelf, you can start today already, and that's why wake up your HR department. You can already start today, rethink how you recruit. You can start rethink how you reskill. You can start rethinking how maybe you just have to become a little bit more strict in your performance reviews in certain areas, or so. It's not. There is going to be a tsunami, but it's a tsunami leaving from Japan, and we're in Australia. We still have time to. So there is
Yeah.
time to prepare. So I don't see it as it's going to have a big impact, but the impact is not only going to be on redundancy, but also shortage. And I've recently had a meeting with a client, and they were missing 3 people. And I've told them a year ago, you're missing 3 people in your, and they said, we'll find them next year when the project is done. Can't find them.
Yeah, right.
Or at the price that is way too expensive that they want. So I think workforce planning is a crucial topic that needs to move up in the agenda of the CEO and the board to start thinking about it. And even if you have to change it every 3 months because of a new technology, that at least you have a base load, and with a good Excel, you can do many things and start from there.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean that's interesting in and of itself, right? Because I feel like this is, looking at it crudely, where the C-suite can actually start earning the millions of dollars that they get paid, right, and do some proper strategizing and not just sit on a strategy that's kind of run itself for years. Like it's, I would say it's probably a good thing, using your human body analogy. If you've been bulking up, right, and now you're getting into a cut period where you need to start managing your diet a bit more closely and start training a bit more rigorously, whatever. Like that can't be bad. That should theoretically be quite helpful and healthy for your business, right, to go through that process. And I feel like we're just saying that AI is accelerating that process at the moment. Is that right?
The weight example is a very good one. I love cycling, and what you see, for example, now with the Tour de France, that's a lot of cyclists that were bigger earlier in the year now lost 4 to 5 kilos.
Yeah.
But they knew they had to lose 4 to 5 kilos after their last race in the beginning of the year. So they didn't have to do a crash diet. They just had to reduce their calorie intake just by a little bit. And by the time they got... So that's basically what I'm also trying to say to an organization. Don't wait until you have to do a crash diet, but about what is the race that is going to happen maybe in a year or 5 years' time? What would be the ideal body composition that we need? And how can we become flexible? How do we react to calories? How do we in order to be able to shift or not? And I think by having that, for example, partnerships is a really interesting topic. What I now see with the best performing companies, they don't have all the AI specialists on the payroll, but they have some really good collaboration models where, I'm on a few boards, for example, where, I add my knowledge. I'm not on the payroll, but they can tap into whenever they need. They have technical experts. So I think we should also think about workforce in a different way and think beyond the limits of our company border. And one question I very often ask when I start a project with a client is, okay, what are the 5 AI partnerships that you have today that you're happy with?
And does anyone have any, or are they?
Sometimes they have one, or they have an old software supplier they still have a relationship with, where they're testing with, so I think having that ecosystem is a really important element, because it will help you also to tap into that knowledge and expertise whenever you need it. It's much more stable. Yeah.
I'm totally with you on that one, because I mean, not just because that's how I make money, obviously, but like a lot of the conversations that I have at the moment are exactly the same. Where with Flow State, I've gone from running programs that were fairly traditionally focused in the digital marketing sense. It's like people doing stuff and automating things where you can, but then obviously having followed and being a part of the the current revolution / tsunami that we're talking about now, as I'm sure you do as well. Like I was talking to a prospective client last week about this, where the amount of work that I can get done just as one person with a few of the fractional people that are in my team, because I have this model as well where I'm like, I've got a expertise that I don't have in other people, but we don't have a team as such. We just tag each other in when we need each other for the knowledge, which obviously works. But then talking to people, like, there's obviously an appetite to start in-housing this stuff and teach people how to do it. And that's where to your point, the sort of knowledge-based industry, I think, is changing in a really exciting way. But I often rub up against a very amusing, to your point earlier, traditional business issues of if you're going to get paid, for example, as an agency by some companies, they'll be like, oh no, that has to come out of this budget at this spend level. We can't do that, Or if you're going to be brought on board as a consultant, you'll need to go through their procurement process, and it'll take 3 months. And I think that speaks to exactly the challenge you're talking about, right? Where the actual structure of the business is actually stopping them sometimes from bringing on board the right kind of knowledge, or the right partners they need. And I guess these are exactly the kind of ground level changes that you would need to start thinking about making, right? I mean, if your business is structured in a way that doesn't allow you to actually engage the people that you need to get the knowledge from, then you're going to be going slower and potentially at a bigger risk. So I just find that it's quite an amusing example of where the actual basics of the business is kind of stopping them from moving quickly, which is a real danger now from what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. So their old processes are holding them back to make the jump, the new dynamic that is needed. And it's also part of the workforce process. What I always recommend is, let's be a little bit more strict on the hiring side, for example, but use the money that you don't spend to set up an ecosystem. And let's now identify what we need in our ecosystem today before we are developing this within our own workforce. So it's like a buffer that you build, and maybe for certain functions you will never need somebody in your own workforce. Maybe in 2 years you need it for a few roles, and so by having that buffer, using the budget that you already have approved, it makes it like a zero-sum game, and it makes it a little bit more flexible. But I do agree that if you don't have unless the CEO says, this is what I want, it's very often, okay, where are we going to get the budget from to do so?
Yeah. No, so I'm with you. I think it's it's interesting seeing these challenges at the coal face, as you would have said back in the day, right? I think and this to me just validates all the stuff that you're saying. It's very real, very practical challenges that I don't think are scary to solve, to your point, but it's just having the confidence to know that, exactly as you said at the start, that this is all just basic business strategy thinking. You just need to sort of possibly realign, the way that you do things underneath our thinking, I guess, to take advantage of the current market conditions, I guess.
And it plays at all levels, Stuart. If you think you have a board, what is the current level of knowledge on AI today in the average board in Australia or wherever? We will probably
I would like to comment on an official recording, but a mixed bag.
It will be, and most of the boards that I meet, that's exactly the reason. Get us up to speed so we can direct the management team, challenge them in the right way. So the business model that we've set up already for a very long time, where you have those two instances that have to challenge each other to move forward, is a very good dynamic. Only when the knowledge is available to challenge each other. And I think, I always come back to the same point. So I think the knowledge revolution also needs to happen there. And I think every board member that is listening should ask him or herself, okay, how well are we doing, and what can we do in the next coming 3 months to increase our knowledge level so that we can guide the management team in a better way to ask at least the right questions.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And look, I think that comes back to, a good link to sort of talk about your 3A's model that I wanted to dig into a bit as well, Jeroen, because I think that's where we're very much in the same mental space of extending human thinking and being able to do better work, should be on everyone's radar right now. And that's where I'm, as I was saying to you earlier, I'm trying to get away from the complaining and the challenges. Yes, they're always there, but what are we actually doing that can be more positive, that can help everybody, instead of just freaking out about stuff. So let's just run through your 3A model, because I know obviously you cover a lot, and you've got a kind of a broad view of this, but I think this is a really good example of everything we're talking about today. So, do you want to just explain what the three A's are and how they kind of fit together? Because I think that really neatly sort of focuses the things we've been talking about so far. And then there's a few bits I just wanted to see where to ask you
Sure.
after you've run through that.
Yeah. Well, the starting point was you are a strategist or a business leader, and you have to think about what kind of impact is AI going to have on what we do. And we want to approach it from a non-technology point of view. So that's where the three A's fit. It gives you a framework, simple, to think about how you can integrate AI into your strategy. And the first A is focused on your job. So it's focused on an individual, a task that you have to do. It's called augmented intelligence. So it's basically how can you use AI to become better in your job. I'll give you an example. I've done a project with a company where purchasing is really important. And we found out that it was a strategic advantage. And the next question was, can we use AI to even become better? We found out that the quality of a junior buyer was pretty much 12% less good than a senior buyer. They've bought at the wrong times, or maybe a little bit too much, or not enough. So we calculate about 12% difference, quality difference between one level and the highest level and the lowest level. When we said, can we use AI? Can't we make the junior smarter by putting an AI coach on their shoulder? And we then went to the senior buyers and asked them, why are you so good? And for them, it was very difficult because it's called experience. And what you want to do is you want to capture that experience and use that experience in a way that it can be translated into a coach that can help you to become better. So we developed a model, not on the technology side, we just bought something, but we frameworked buying for that specific company in a way that we've broken it down into sub skills and chunks, etc. I wrote a book about it, how to do it. So it's very specific, a very specific
cool.
way on how to deal with knowledge. And we've put that on the shoulder of a junior buyer. We did some tests, and we've closed the gap now with about 7.5%. So
Wow,
there's still a
that's
gap,
awesome.
but the gap. And some of the senior buyers also use it, and they even become, let's say, 1.5 to 2% better.
That's
So,
pretty impressive.
yeah.
And being able to measure it to that degree is obviously great, right? Because
Yes.
you're making it super tangible.
Yeah. So that is augmented intelligence. The best known example here is coding. That's the reference. And so how much coding can be done, but that's taking over the job. In the example here, it's augmented intelligence, where you still have a person doing the job, but you help them to become better. The photography example that I gave you earlier in the session, that also fits there. So how can I use AI to boost my role? And especially if you have more people in one role, this is very useful to do. The second A is not focusing on the role or the job, but focused on the process. And that's called automate. And that's basically, if you look at a process, what are some of the parts in the process that we can hand over to AI? I saw on television recently a company that is working in engineering, and they were interviewing the lead engineer. And he said, well, normally after I've done an intake with a client, it takes me a day and a half to write it up.
Right.
Today, with AI, I can do it much faster. So that's on the first A. But the really big advantage comes that we have now a process where the client is involved. AI is involved. If there is information missing, they give an immediate trigger to the client. So the throughput time of the process is also I think it was like 40% faster because
Yeah, right.
now when we have information missing from the client, they will get an email within a second, and
Yeah.
and they get push mails, and so the interaction has improved. So we can do it cheaper, but we can also do it faster.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the faster bit or the better bit is something most people forget. Everybody
Yeah.
is focusing on the costs, and yes, there is definitely something that we can. But also, if your strategic advantage is to be very client oriented and react fast, you have here something that can increase your. This example, I've been looking around, and you see it in many industries. It's used, for example, also in insurance, and when you have to file a claim, that you get immediately feedback. Um, so that you forgot to fill in some of the specifics from the accident, for example. So
Mm.
that's the second part. And we haven't seen anything yet in that area. And the reason is because agentic AI will arrive. And basically, what is agentic AI is that they not only give you advice, but they will also take over some of the decisions.
Mm.
A very useful exercise that I'm doing now a lot in a lot of organizations is to not only map the process, but to start thinking about, okay, what are now the key decisions that are made in the process? Which knowledge do you need to make that decision? And is
Yeah.
going to be an AI solution available in the next 5 years or 3 years or 1 year that will be able to deal with that specific decision?
Yeah.
It gives you a very good view on what your supply chain or your purchasing process or your sales process could look like in 5 years. And even though the technology solution is not there yet, you have already identified what kind of technology solution that you need.
Mm.
And that makes it
Yeah.
easier instead of every 3 months running behind and giving a lot of money to expensive consultants, etc., or software providers. You turn it around, you have a very good view on your process. And so that's the automate bit. And I would definitely recommend organizations to start playing around with that, starting from the process. One of the most made mistakes that I see right now is that companies launch pilots on technology, not on the business. So,
Mm.
let's let's
Yeah.
let's
I've seen
try
a lot of that as
try
well.
this or
Yeah.
let's try that. So I try to turn it around, start from the strategy, see what are your key processes, and within those key processes, what are the decision points? What is the knowledge you need for the decision points, and can we start from there? So that's the second A. The third one is what I call aspire, and that is beyond the job, beyond the process, but it's on the company level.
Mm.
And on the company level, it's basically okay, what are now potential new services or things we can come up with for our clients? I worked with a hospital, for example. Everybody has wearables, but for some
Mm.
reason, wearables are not yet used a lot when you have patient follow up. Most hospitals, when the patient leaves, they say bye bye, and then you have to go to another profession. They will follow up. But what if you keep track of the wearables? For example, if you have had hip surgery, you can track people if they walk or not, if not, or you can give them push messages. There are a lot of
Mm.
applications out there to help you run better, bike better, etc. Why not copy paste that into? So that's just one
Yeah.
example. The point here is start thinking about what are some of the needs that exist on the client side, and can we use AI as a way to come up with a possible solution that wasn't possible or it was too expensive before. So those are
Yeah.
the three A's to think about. So whenever I run a workshop with a leadership team, those would be the three where they get some homework, where we look at, and it helps to broaden the scope, and it also helps you to lengthen your horizon. Most
Mm.
organizations think way too short term. What you should
Yeah.
try to do is think 3 to 5 years ahead, even though that you don't know yet what the technology solutions will be. You can already start thinking about, is this a decision we are willing to outsource or not? Do we
Yeah.
have knowledge to outsource that decisions or not? What are the ethical risks? What are the so that the whole discussion can already take place today, specifically on that point, and then you will run into some topics that you might not have seen before. I've worked with the Dutch government, for example, so for the whole of the Netherlands, and what we've seen is that they've had an issue with data quality a few years ago, and that impacts still today their ambition level. If you compare
Mm.
their ambition level with any other country in Europe, their ambition level was at the time when we started lower, and the reason was because of the ethical um, elements that were predominantly there for a valid reason, but it was limiting the ambition level too much. So when you start this also at your company level, you will run into some ethical topics. You will run into, but that's good because you still have time today before the tsunami arrives to come up with a framework, to professionalize your discussions around, do we want to fire somebody or not? Do we? So there are already, I have in my workshop already 5 key elements that can be discussed today. But what you see is that most companies haven't had that discussion.
Mm.
So
Interesting.
that's the aspire to start thinking ahead and see, okay, what are some of the new ways that we can come up with to, for example, in my profession, is yeah, online keynotes is one thing, but maybe you can have your avatar doing things. You can have an online. So there are lots of opportunities that you can start exploring today.
Yeah. No, I really like that. I think, and one of the things that struck me about the the information that you shared with me, Jeroen, and like in that framework is exactly as you said. It just takes this, putting aside the scary technical bits, like just thinking about probably the things that all businesses should be considering all the time, right? It's I think that's where I'm seeing some there's real opportunities everywhere when you look for them, right? And like your example about wearables is a great one because my biggest disappointment with the medical industry at the moment is that I can't get, I've got like a Garmin, like a running watch that I track all my stuff with, and I run and ride a lot as well, but I was like, why can't I just send all that information to my GP before I go? And like the last time I went to see him, when I went for a slight aside, when I turned 40 and had like I need to go and have some sort of all over body checkup to be like, is everything all right? I don't know. People tell you that's the age when you should start to like look after yourself or whatever. And I was like, right, I'm going to go and do that. But obviously, I could have given him whatever 10 years worth of at least like, activity data and stuff. And he would have at least seen a load of lifestyle stuff. But then I just filled in some sort of paper questionnaire that he, turned into notes or whatever. And he was like, you've got slightly high cholesterol. That was basically it, which is, I think, a common issue for people who eat as many pastries as I do. But like that was basically it. And I was like, he was like, oh, what are you here for? And I was like, well, you tell me. Like I don't know what might be wrong. I don't know. But it's just so to your point, I understand why it is, but it was a very low tech human discussion purely based on this guy's experience as a doctor, right? So like, what if he's a terrible doctor? What if he's missed something that is going to come up in a few years? I don't know, but you just have to trust these people because that's what we've done so far, right? But I do feel like this, medicine and diagnosing stuff is a really sort of major area for like big improvements, and like I understand why there's some hesitancy around it, but that hesitancy might be costing, I don't know, thousands of lives a week at the moment. So it feels like an area where there should be a bit more focus to me, which is, I guess to your point, why this way of thinking is really important, right? And sort of de-risking the thinking so that you can actually move forward a bit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, look, I really like it, and I think I've got many stories of frustration with people not going as fast as I feel like they should, but that's conversation for another time. We'll save that. What I wanted to ask you specifically about the 3As in your conversations, Jeroen, like you sort of touched on this a little bit, is do you see companies currently is there anyone that's doing this really well right now, or any company that you've sort of worked with where you like, look, they've really taken this and run with it? And are there any areas that people are naturally doing this already?
Well, what you see is that companies that had digital first high on the agenda um, already for some time, they're moving forward quite well. I work
Mm.
in Europe, for
Okay.
example, with a company called KBC, it's a bank, and they always have been very focused on the digital side. And you now see they are, yeah, doing very well, having a very clear strategy on the topic. So I think how invested you were on the technology side and the digital side in your strategy makes or breaks, or makes a big difference. Comes
Mm.
back to how much does your CEO knows about AI?
Yeah.
Well, in that
Yeah.
company, he knows a lot. So I think that's a natural advantage if you come from that angle. The second one is that you see a lot of very small organizations from the technology side. So they love technology, and then um, so that's a second area where I see a lot of positive energy and dynamic going on. Um, so those would be my two, um, yeah, the two areas where I would see, let's say, the most advancement.
Yeah. Okay.
You do see now what I've mentioned in the beginning, that my keynotes, I have much more senior leaders that will join. Training is also on board level, etc. So I think a lot of companies are catching up. They're
Mhm.
coming out of the technology awareness wave and now are into the shit, we have to do something with this
Yeah, I was going to say, they're like, oh
strategy.
my god, it's
Wave.
here,
Yeah.
like right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really positive. Like, I think as we were saying at the start, like I feel like that, and the running theme through the whole conversation, just in case you hadn't picked it up, was exactly that, right? I think the whole AI situation, I actually think, is a great refocus on what we're all good at with our mad animal brains, like that you can't do in a machine. And that's where, to your point in your framework, we need to. I feel like it's where I obviously being in digital and like building digital businesses, I'm like deep in the hole. But it's nice coming back out to see people and sort of say, look, like you do still have value. There is a huge amount of value still in just being a person and using your human skills to direct things. And I think that's where everything you're saying, I feel, sort of supports that direction, right? Where we all just need to lean into the things that only we can do and not be scared that these technologies are coming, just they're not going to come and just destroy life. And like we're all going to be, I don't know, what would we be doing? Nothing, I guess we'd be doing as if they took over everything. But I just can't. I know it's a possibility. I can't see that happening, and I think it's a great time to, exactly as you said, sort of take stock of your position, and the sort of the business you're in, or in your life, and what can you actually do with this stuff that's going to genuinely extend your skills or abilities as a person, not just looking at it as an existential threat that's all negative, because it's just a bit of an oversimplification, I guess.
Yeah, and I do think there will be a societal debate needed at several points in time, um, similar to at the time with the Industrial Revolution, when the
Mm.
with the unions and with yeah, how many days a week do we have to work? I can very well
Yeah.
imagine that maybe we go to a 4-day work week, and people become more involved in their community, or we have more learning initiatives, or we have that could very well happen,
Yeah.
as long as we start thinking about it and have a debate, because the technology revolution won't wait. And
Yes,
the,
exactly.
the biggest suggestion I have for governments is speed up,
Yeah. And
because
look, and actually, I'd love to get you together with Jen, who's been on the podcast as well. Actually, she does a lot of work with government and with the big boys in the consulting world down here. But and sorry to interrupt there, but I completely agree with you there. I think like government is another area that just really needs to pull their heads out of the sand and think properly about what they're doing, right? So sorry, and you carry on, Jeroen. What were you gonna say
No,
there?
that's a very good summary of the point where indeed
Oh,
governments
sorry.
have to wake up. So no,
Yeah.
I'm glad we agree.
No, yeah, no, like I think so, and like obviously I conversation for another time as well on government. I know they've got their own challenges, but I do feel like maybe it's idealistic, but I do think that there's a lot of exciting discussions happening at the moment around exactly what you said, like the 4-day work week, universal basic income. I know is like been discussed endlessly for ages, but what could life look like if we get out of this? And putting this back into the context of what you were saying before, the Industrial Revolution was a wholesale flip of how the world works in terms of industry and production for physical stuff. Whereas now we're in the knowledge work revolution, if you like, and exactly as you said, I'm sure everyone was panicking at the time and thought the world was ending. It's the same. I have to send you it. There's a really funny Ed Klein advert when the first cars were just being released about why you should keep your horse and not buy a car. That's like perfectly illustrates this. Where he's like, your horse can walk through mud and snow. It can get you anywhere. Like it doesn't need. Think of how much hay costs versus a set of new tires. Like it's all this like really, really practical stuff. And I'm like, look, reading that, I'd buy a horse now. Reading that and get rid of the car. But it's as you said, like once we have things, we don't unhave them basically. So like no one's going to uninvent AI, and like the sort of momentum is too great now for it to stop. So I think we just need to be involved in the conversation, I guess, is the main thing, right?
Exactly.
Look, I'm with you there, Jeroen. So look, I think just conscious of your time, if we're gonna wrap that up and sort of I won't try and ask you to summarise that long conversation, but I guess tell us. I know you mentioned you've got a residency coming up down here. Like, if people want to get in touch with you, what are you up to for the rest of the year and into next year? And what can people do to learn more about what you're up to? You've got a few books out as well. Like, how do they get in touch and come to a masterclass or come and see you when you're in Australia?
Yeah, I've learned, Stuart, during COVID that I was tired of traveling. I was flying like a ping pong ball all over the world. So I came up with a new concept, which is called a residency. So I spent 1 or 2 years somewhere far away from Belgium, my home country, to allow to do keynotes locally without too much travel. So I'll be
Like
based
it.
in Sydney from mid-February to mid-March. So if people in Australia or close by Australia are interested in a keynote or a masterclass, they can reach out. And the easiest way to do that is either through my website on my name or through LinkedIn. That would be
Perfect.
just. People can also subscribe to the newsletter. There are about 40,000 other enthusiastic people reading that every month. If you want to stay up to date on the latest thinking on these topics.
Awesome. Well, look, I'll share all the details with this episode as well. But look, I would love to talk to you while you're down here, and probably I feel like there's a lot we could talk about as well, Jeroen. So if you're keen to talk again, it'd be great to have you back on. And yeah, we'll share all the various ways people get in touch when we get this published. But look, is there anything else you feel that you want to share by way of closing thoughts, Jeroen, like on that conversation? I know we covered a lot of areas there.
Well, I think what helped me a lot is to have a clear view on what is actually AI.
Mm.
And I still feel that quite a few people have the wrong impression of the topic. And basically, AI is a mathematical formula that predicts the next dot or the next letter or the next. So patterns is the crucial topic to think about. Now, if you talk about patterns, you're talking about knowledge. So the second keyword is knowledge. We talked a lot about knowledge, and I think everybody listening should rethink AI and knowledge for themselves, for their processes, for their complete business model. There are lots and lots of opportunities out there. The third one would be there needs to become a societal discussion on the topic, but in a positive way, because we can't stop it. Once the genie is out of the box, it's there. But we need some guardrails to move forward, and to do that, we need the knowledge. So I think for me, one of the crucial topics right now that I would put centrally in the whole AI discussion would be knowledge. It's a knowledge revolution. Do I have the knowledge to participate in a discussion? And do I have the knowledge in my company to find benefits others haven't seen so that my strategy will be robust, and be successful? It's probably when we meet next year, it might be another word, or it might have evolved yet. If you've asked me a year ago, a year and a half, I would have said technology, and enthusiasm about the technology. So awareness was my keyword. So it now has evolved to knowledge. So yeah, I don't know what it's going to be next, but yeah, that's my short summary.
I like it. No, that was an excellent summary, and it'll be, as you say, it'll be interesting to see where we land when you're actually down here next year. So I think put a post-it note somewhere, and let's pick up on that when I see you in 6 months or so, because the world could be very different when we're getting together in Sydney in February 2027.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, look, thanks so much for jumping on and having a chat, Jeroen. That was really awesome and super interesting, and hopefully everyone else found it interesting. And look, more than welcome to come back and continue the discussion if you want to rejoin before you're here in person.
Thank you, Stuart. I enjoyed it very well, and look forward to meeting you live in a few months.